You're listening to the Sketchnote Army Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Rohde, the author of the Sketchnote Handbook and the Sketchnote Workbook, and this is the podcast where I chat with sketchnoters and visual thinkers and try to understand what makes them tick. Hey, are you looking for the ideal sketchbook for your sketchnoting practice? The Sketchnote Idea Book is the sketchbook designed for sketchnoters. Equipped with no bleed, no show-through paper, you can take almost any marker or pen you can throw at it. Get 10% off with code ARMY at airship.store. Hey everyone, this is Mike, and I'm here with Ty Hatch. Ty, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here.
So Ty, we've known each other for years and years. We were talking about when we thought we connected. You had a pretty pinpoint accurate time point.
It's funny. Back in 2008, I went to a UX Week, which was a conference put on by, for those that remember, Adaptive Path. I think they got purchased and became the in-house UX department for Capital One a few years ago. I was there and I was like, I need to pay attention, and did some sketch notes or just did notes. I wasn't thinking about it, and got an email from you after I posted them up on the OG photo sharing Flickr. And you're like, hey, can I put these into my Sketchnote Army? And so we just stayed in touch throughout the years since then. So
Yep. Well, that leads right into telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
You bet. So I am a UX manager for OC Tanner, which is an employee recognition company. Kind of help create the space for employee recognition. Work with a team. I have 3 people on my team. We're part of a larger experience group, and we focus on helping people feel appreciated at work by the employers. So it's a really fun thing to do. I also, as you know, do sketch notes at times, and random doodles and whatnot when the time allows. So that's me. But I enjoy UX design. It's a fun problem space to be in. So.
Well, I can relate to that as a principal UX designer. I find it fascinating as well. I focus on software, but there's tons of opportunities to make things better always, it seems like. So It's good to hear you're focusing on that. And that's such a critical space, especially now with, all the challenges of hiring people and maintaining employees and not having them not leave by recognition. Huge opportunities there, I would think.
Yeah, it's huge. And you like me, it's hard to feel sometimes like you're moving the needle, you're making a difference for people. And one of the things that really gets me going is knowing that the work that I'm doing is actually helping people feel that appreciation, that they get that recognition from not only their peers, but from their leaders and whatnot.
Yeah, super important. It's something that often goes under the radar, and managers might not think much about it, but it's so critical, right? And it doesn't cost you much other than time and a little bit of thoughtfulness.
Yes,
so that's really cool. So I would love to hear a little bit more about how you ended up in the space where you are, both professionally, but also as a sketchnoter. Like, how did you always drawn since you were a little kid? Like, what's been your history? Let's start from when you're just a little guy.
So I spent a lot of time outdoors growing up. I grew up in southern Idaho, and southeastern Washington, miles outside of my small town. So there wasn't much to do there. Right? We were too far out to get TV reception. We often joke, we got marching ants on our TV screen, right? Because this was back in the days before cable. So we had terrible TV reception on our black and white TV. We did have indoor plumbing and electricity, so that was always good. But my brother and I, we would leave the house, go out in the backyard. We didn't have neighbors at the time, and so we would just go out sometime after breakfast, and typically we'd come back around dinner time because we were hungry. And we would always have some sort of adventure and whatnot. And And I think at some point, a friend of ours introduced us to Dungeons and Dragons, and I became a really big fantasy nut. This was the early days of D&D. I used to have like a first edition, monster manual and player's handbook and DM's guide and all that. We colored in them as coloring books because they were all just black and white illustrations. And I loved it. Got into reading books and whatnot. Wanted to play football, but didn't seem to get enough interest for college people. It's a small town, nobody really knows what's going on with a small town. I served a mission for my church for a couple of years, and then returned home. And I was visiting my grandparents' house, and this is probably my favorite story about what got me into what I do today. Is there was this really awesome cover. There's a couple of these just burly looking pirates on it, and I was like, "Well, this is cool." Visual stimuli to get someone bored at grandma and grandpa's house, right? And it said the Wyatt family. I was, oh, that's a piratey name. And I was like, oh, let's read about these pirates. It wasn't pirates. It was a story about the artistic legacy of NC Wyatt and his son Andrew and his grandson Jamie. And I just got hooked. And in fact, I have a self-portrait from that issue that I took out of the magazine. I think I found a couple of copies over the years, but there was a really cool self-portrait that he did that I have hanging on my wall with some painter's tape. And I was like, oh, you can get paid doing art? What? Completely radical concept for me. And I'd always loved comic books. My brother and I collected comics over the years. And so we figured out, I was like, oh, what can I do with art? And so I started exploring the different art related careers, and I kind of stumbled upon graphic design. Because as I learned about illustration as a career, I was like, that's really competitive. I don't know that I'm good enough to compete there, but I can definitely, think visually and solve problems. And so I tended toward that. And that was about the time I was a junior at a state school in Washington State, where I'd met my wife, and I applied for an art school in Portland, and I'm like, there's no way they'll let me in, but surprisingly they did. And I finished a BFA in graphic design, and my senior capstone project there at the time was a website. This was 1998, I want to say. Right about the time my oldest was born, and my senior project was an informational website on typography, which is still out there. I did a really quick redesign of it like the next year because it was a hideous thing when I got looking at it in reality, but it's still sitting there, 20 some odd years later. And it was an informational website about typography because I fell in love with type in school. And that's one of the things I absolutely loved. I was like, ooh, could I make money doing typography? And I was like, no, I can't. Type is another one of those professions. It's a very niche specialty.
Yeah, you can do it, but you have to really work at it.
Yeah. And so, but I love design. I love the visual solving of problems and communicating clearly with design. So, for several years I did that, and slowly over the time morphed into more of an interaction UX designer. Just as the industry changed, and I'm like, this is a good thing. This can provide for me and my family. I enjoy doing it, and so just kind of slowly over the years gravitated into technology and doing UX. And so that was the thing that got me where I'm at. Particularly doing sketchnotes. Like the sketchnote that I did at UX Week was kind of the first time that I actually shared anything that I'd done like that. I don't think I did. I would do them in my sketchbooks because it helped me process what was being communicated in presentations that I would go to. I really took off though. I want to say about 2014, 2015. when I got my first iPad.
Mm.
And there's this little app that was really cool. I'm like, this is cool. I was trying to use it with my finger. Then I got, but the company that made the app, which is Paper, the company at the time was called 53.
53. Yeah.
I think, yeah. And I got one of their styluses, which looked like a carpenter's pencil.
Yeah.
I was like, this is cool, but I didn't like the drag of the rubber on it. But it made my finger drawings not as crappy. So
Yeah.
I'd use that stylus, and I tried to play around with it a bit more. But and then Apple introduced the pencil, and it was a game changer for me. And I've dabbled a bit with other applications, but Paper's still my go-to when it comes to sketchnotes because of how it works. But yeah, and I still maintain sketchbooks. I'm working on, I have one now. It's more random skulls and patterns and headshots like you see. I participate in Inktober each year, which is a drawing challenge. And if you go over into my Instagram, you'll see that I have a few. I think I actually made it through all 31 days this year.
You did,
which is like maybe the second or third time that I've done it. I've completed Inktober. But that's just fun. It's a good challenge to just kind of do random headshots. That's what I enjoy, the personalities that kind of come out of those headshots. So, yeah, that's a bit of how I got into it, what I've been doing.
Wow. And now, do you still use? Still do sketchnoting from time to time?
I do. Yeah. I haven't as much with the pandemic. Right before the pandemic, I was actually doing a fair amount of it. I was getting contacted by conferences to help with that. I did a Mind the Product conference, and did a Pluralsight Live as well, and they were a lot of fun. The thing with what I like about my particular process with sketchnotes is I prefer being in person and attending a live event, because there's processing that real time is the thing that I did. I've tried to do several different random YouTube presentations and stuff like that, but I don't get quite the energy and the vibe off of a live event.
Interesting. So when I look at your style, I see you have a very unique ink style. I don't know how to describe it, but it looks like you're using like a brush pen or something. It's not. There's some single line work, right? But there's some that looks like it's kind of thick and thin. What is the tool that you're using to achieve that? And I assume if you're in pencil, you're still in paper, right?
Yeah. So yeah, when you're looking at the Inktober stuff, I typically I'll pencil it out. I'll sketch it out in pencil, and then I just use fine liners. I use a thicker fine liner, and then like a 0.8, and then sometimes I go in with the smaller one. Okay. I noticed, one little tool that I saw that like a Kavico.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, I put it in my, and it's really hard to justify that. Not a cheap thing, right? But it got low enough, and I'm like, okay, it was my birthday, and I was like, I told my wife, I'm gonna splurge and get this, and like, okay. And so I love it. I haven't done much drawing with it. I got an extra broad nib, and it's a little too thick for me. So I have my pen my writing instrument addiction is well and breathing and well, and I collect art supplies when I'm trying to figure out something I want to do. And so I ordered a broad nib off of Jet Pens, which is not a good sight if you like writing instruments. I mean, it's not good for your wallet. It's a great sight.
It's great sight, and yeah, you spend a lot of money there pretty easily. Yep.
Oh yeah.
And then when you work in, so Paper now is owned by WeTransfer, the file transfer company, and still is maintained and has had some updates. Like you, that's I use Procreate for illustration work, but if I'm doing sketchnotes, I go right to Paper. It just at this point it feels really natural. The tools are really, I'm very aware of them. So so when you do sketchnoting in Paper, What are the tools that you like to use there? I'm just kind of curious about that. Looking at just have one of your samples up here on my screen. Looks
Yeah.
like you
So yeah, so I have I have an iPad Pro that I use with an Apple Pencil. And typically when I do it, I'll you know, what I love about paper is the intuitiveness of the tools. And you know, they're like, they have a paintbrush, they have an ink pen or fountain pen, they have a couple of different types of markers, and you know, typically, and a pencil. And typically, um, I like to do a little sketch of the presenter. And so if you look at it, you know, you'll see that most frequently. And then notes around the concepts that they're talking about. Often, you know, I'll get the sketch of the presenter, and I do that in the kind of in the quiet moments of their presentation. But I'll either use the ink pen, you know, the fountain pen version, kind of in a medium nib. You know, it's relatively inexpensive to pay for the pro version for Procreate,
right,
or for
$12 a year, I think.
paper. Yeah, and I'm more than happy to pay that because it's given me a lot of opportunities. But the thing that I love is the color mixing. Like, they've nailed color mixing like nobody else has, and I think it's one of the best things that they've done in software. And but yeah, so I'll use that, or I'll use a fine liner to do the block letters and whatnot. You know, and then I seem to have, you know, every now and then I have little people pop up that are just, you know, head, body, and arms and legs, to sometimes help capture certain concepts that the presenters are doing. Because the thing that I found really interesting with Sketchnotes is that it's that real-time synthesizing of the concepts that they're presenting, that I get the most out of them. And largely, you know, it started as a selfish practice to pay attention and stay awake. But I found that, you know, I still love doing that because it really helps me to get something out of these presentations as well. But yeah, paper is hands down the most intuitive tool, I think, for just sketching out in general.
Yeah.
And I love it. So
I agree. Well, you know, we're talking a little bit about sketchnoting specifically. I'd love to hear, we've sort of done your who you are and what you do. We got your story of your origin. Tell us a little bit about something you're working on now, whether it's work or personal, that you're excited about that you can share with us.
Well, let's see. One of the things I'm really excited about, I have no clue how to do it, is I want to try and figure out how I can be a little bit, you know, work a little bit more in conversational UIs. It's conversational UIs seem to be taking a lot. You know, that there's the chat GPT bot, right, that everybody's talking about. All these AI-based tools, which have their place, I think. But you know, like, how can I build a conversational way to like present my work or to present myself? And you know, I've done some really terrible things, you know, experiments that you know, will never see the light of day. One of the things I love about design is that's experimentation is part of trying to figure out a solution, right? It's like, you know, you and I both know as designers, it's like you can't really come up with a good solution unless you know what the problem is. And so, trying to figure that out from my perspective, like, okay, how can I make something like this happen, right? I mean, and in a way that I can somehow manage, right? Because I will fully admit to being old school. It's like my personal site, it's there. I think I got a redesign out last year that I'm really happy with. You know, that was the 7-year cycle of refreshing your personal site. You know, it seems like 7 to 8 years is about the time it takes for me to get around to saying, you know, I should probably redesign my personal site.
Yeah.
And actually finding the time to do it. And so, you know, I want to, you know, being able to maintain that in a way, right? Because with all the different social media things, and you know, it's really hard to centralize where your content is in a good way, right? because if you post on social media, you don't have a real centralized location for any of the content that you can put out, right? You have to say, I'm going to focus on this platform, and that's really kind of a dangerous thing, I think, in how do you position yourself, not only as a professional, working professional, like a design professional, like we are, but as an artist, and give yourself a home where people know, oh, if I go here, I'll be able to find and go and look at all the other things, right? Because as much as I love social media and Instagram, I'm tired of seeing an ad every third post, right, in Instagram as I scroll through my feed, right? And then you have other social media services that kind of self-destruct. And so I want to have a good centralized location. I haven't been able to get that fully nailed down yet, because as much as everybody loves WordPress and it powers so many sites, you have to really want to put in that time and effort to make WordPress work. We have there's other platforms and stuff too, but it's like, how can you make yourself, your content your own, and have it in a place that everybody can know, okay, if I go here, I'll find their stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure that out for myself.
That's something that challenged me as well. And years ago, I decided to go Squarespace just because I could build what I wanted and not think too much about it. And it sort of constrained me a lot, like paper does, provides, and it's grown to meet my needs over time. So that's been really good. It's secure as well. I had the instance where I ran websites on WordPress and did an update, and someone was running a illegal pharmaceutical site buried in my website, and I was like, all right, not doing that anymore. So I was out on WordPress, self-hosting, and switched to Squarespace, and it's been a good experience. But yeah, I felt the same way. You talk about scrolling through Instagram, it feels like more and more of its ads and less of its actual content. Like I have to really fight through the ads to actually get to my friends or interesting things, and that's frustrating. So someone's going to hopefully solve that problem soon.
Yeah, there's a lot of different platforms out there. Mastodon's taking off, but it's like, in my mind, it's a little too complex for the normal person. And just about everything, you have to feed the algorithm. You have to like continually be putting stuff out there to maintain any sort of audience. And people have lives, outside of posting on social media. And I think that's one thing I think in general that people don't think about too much is, I have a life that is very important to me with my family. And it's like, I'm not going to be posting or all the time for these different platforms because, it's great. I love doing it, but it's like, that's not my primary, one of my key focuses. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a question everybody has to ask, right? Like what am I going to feed this thing? What is it? What are its expectations of me? Because sometimes you come to realize that these platforms have expectations for what they want you to do that doesn't align with what you want to do. You have to make that decision.
Yeah.
Because you only get so much time, right? It keeps going away. So that's really fascinating. Well, I hope that redesigning your website goes well, and I know what that feels like. I haven't done it for a while, so I know what a challenge it is.
I appreciate that. Yeah. The one thing I'm really interested in trying out, and maybe I'll be doing it a little bit this week, a bit if I can, is AWS has this thing called Amplify Studio, where they pre-built some components and whatnot in React, powered by a Figma template. And so you change your components in the Figma template, connect your account, and you should be able to like launch out some sort of app or whatever. And so I'm like, I have the template. It's been taunting and mocking me for several months since I discovered it.
Yeah.
Inanimate software can't do that, right? I mean, AI might be able to do that, but inanimate software doesn't necessarily do that. It's your conscience saying, hey, you got this. Are you going to do something at some point?
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Figma is a design tool, vector-based design tool where many designers build often their prototypes and their mock-ups with. So what Ty's talking about is he would build a mock-up of his site and then use React, which is a back-end technology, I think is a fair way to describe it, populated by Facebook.
Yeah, it's a JavaScript framework. So
Framework. That's what I was
um,
the word I was
to,
looking for.
to help build out, yeah, to help build out components. So yeah, and AWS is Amazon Web Services, which is the, basically a simple way of looking at it is they provide a lot of the cloud hosting services
Right.
for a lot of providers. And so like when your services aren't working, there might be an AWS outage somewhere, um, causing some of that stuff. So like when the internet services go down, sometimes there's an outage with some of these cloud providers. So
Well, later in the
this is
show,
infrastructure of the internet.
we'll definitely have a link to your website. So maybe by the time this episode launches, you'll have a new site up there that people can look at.
Hey,
And
it gives
as they're
me
listening,
a goal to work on.
there you go. There you go. This episode of the Sketchnote Army Podcast is brought to you by Concepts, a perfect tool for sketchnoting, available on iOS, Windows, and Android. Concepts' vector-based drawing feature gives you the power to adjust your drawings anytime you like. You can nudge the curve of a line, swap out one brush for another, or change the stroke thickness and color at any stage of your drawing, saving hours and hours of rework. Vectors provide clean, crisp, high-resolution output for your sketch notes at any size you need, large or small. Never worry about fuzzy sketch notes again. Concepts is a powerful, flexible tool that's ideal for sketchnoting. Search Concepts in your favorite app store to give it a try. So let's take a little shift now and talk about tools. We've sort of hinted at some. You talked about Paper by WeTransfer as sort of a digital tool. Let's jump back into analog. And more specifically, like, are there brands of pens that you like, brands of paper, notebooks, pencils, so that people who are listening can kind of dig them up and like maybe experiment a little bit?
Absolutely. So right now, if I look at my desk, I have a mechanical pencil, and I'll send you some links so you can put these in the show notes. But it's a mechanical pencil, 0.51, with a metaferrule. It's by Uni. But the nice thing is you can, when you have a metal pencil, you'll often have this little nib that kind of gets bent and breaks. But what's nice about this pencil is that it retracts, and it's fairly affordable. I think it's like maybe about $15. It's got a polymer eraser on the back of it. I also love fine liners. I've gone the rounds with a whole bunch. I have some Copics. I have the current one that I'm using is a Uni pen fine liner. And I've found that I really like these. They're really good waterproof. So you can lay down watercolor washes or alcohol inks on it. I got this one earlier this year. We did a team offsite. We got a Rotring 600.
Those are beautiful pens.
It was a ballpoint. I'm not such a huge fan of ballpoint pens, but I discovered that Kavico makes a gel pen insert refill, and so I got a Kavico gel pen insert in there, and then I have Kavico Lilliput fountain pen. Super and tiny. The thing that amazes me, it's tinier than I thought it was, but the thing I love about it is that the ink just flows and is beautiful. It's really great. As far as like what do I draw on, in the day it's often post-it notes, making lists and whatnot. I have sketchbooks. Right now I'm using one. I've been experimenting a little bit with what I want to use for sketchbooks and stuff. This one's by a company, Global Art Materials. It's just a generic kind of sketchbook. I have for years and years I've used Moleskin's art sketchbooks, which are great. I love that size. I got a 8x8 or 7.5 by 7.5 watercolor sketchbook. I found that was a little too precious. I was like, oh, I got to do art in this stuff. I backed the Kickstarter for the Sketchnote idea book. Got a 3-pack. And I love it, Mike. It's fantastic. The pages are bright white, which I absolutely love, and they held all sorts of things. I got some watercolor in my old one. I have one somewhere, an emergency kit in case I have to go somewhere. Uh, I have another one somewhere that I'm like, let me experiment with some stuff, and then maybe I'll go back and try get back to the idea book. But I found that that notebook that you guys put together was really one of my favorites in recent years.
Great.
And so, the quality of the paper and the whiteness and the thickness made it really, really flexible. And so, the only thing for me is maybe it was a hair too big, a little too wide. I like a little bit smaller, but I absolutely love the paper quality you guys did on that. So, and then like on sketch notes, or not sketch notes, but on the Inktober drawings, I found a 5x7 Strathmore 400 pad of paper. It's really thick, that I absolutely love. And so all of this year's and the in 2021's, which I only did like 16 of them, I have all those originals hanging out on a piece of paper somewhere. One of my goals with my personal site is to be able to set up a way to sell some of these, because art's not fun or good if it's just sitting collecting dust in your house, right? If you do it, I think that part of one of the real joys of making art is sharing it with people and helping them appreciate it. So one of the things I want to get going as well. So
that sounds good.
Yeah.
And as far as digital, you talked about of course paper. We got into that a little bit already. Are there any other tools that you like to play with, or is that sort of your go-to for pretty much everything?
So I do have Procreate on my iPad. My kids use it a lot more than I do. But one thing I found is I don't like the glossy slide of the Apple Pencil on just to make a screen. So I have a textured screen protector on it to give it that textural feel of paper. I found that makes a huge difference for making marks on iPads. And so that's really it. I've toyed with Adobe Fresco, Concepts app. There's one that the Icon Factory does. I can't remember. It's Ben's go-to tool.
Linea, I think Ben Crothers likes that. Ben Norris likes that one.
Norris, yeah. I dabbled that a little bit. It just didn't. What I like about paper is the ability to go from pencil to ink to the watercolor. The brush that they have in paper is fantastic. How you can layer color, make it deep and rich if you want. I haven't been able to get Procreate to do that. Even so, Procreate's a fantastic tool. I love it, but it's really for sketchnotes, to me, it feels like it's a little too powerful. I think what I love about paper is really good at just capturing your flow of thinking, whereas you have to be a lot more deliberate in your usage of Procreate. Although, if you're a concept artist or somebody that's doing stuff like that, then absolutely that's a great place. My son does a lot of. He loves Pokemon. He loves Mario. He's been doing it. He's gonna be turning 25 this next year, and I'm like, dude, you could like do commissions of people's Pokemon teams. He does this fantastic stuff. I'll send you a link to his Pokemon stuff. But he'll do characters and whatnot. He's drawn so many Mario things. He's drawn like hundreds of Pokemon, and he gets them scaled right. And so I just absolutely love looking at his stuff. I'm like, dude, you could probably do something with this. But he's like, yeah, I know, Dad, but I do this for fun. So, which is great.
That sounds like a great variety of tools. You had quite a span. Some that I hadn't thought about, especially the the Kaweco, I think it was the Kaweco insert that goes into the Rotring. I think you talked about, because I'm not a ballpoint
Yeah.
fan either. There's a Schaefer insert that I use in my Retro 51s that I really like too.
Mhm.
So probably a similar insert, I suppose.
Yeah, I really like the Kaweco one. There's another one that seems to get pretty good reviews that I've seen on I want to call Oto.
Oh yeah,
Gelling.
Oto. I've had Oto. Yeah, those are great. I think that's
Yeah. So
Japanese, I think.
yeah, yeah. I think you know, I mark making on a budget is a big deal for me. You know, it's not necessarily the tools that make the person; it's what you do with the tools that you have.
Right.
So I think you know, having a widely available set of tools is really important, and but also making sure that they're budget friendly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is an important thing too.
Yep, I totally agree. So let's make one last shift into tips. So the way I frame this is, imagine someone's listening. Maybe they're kind of at a plateau, or they just need some inspiration, a little boost. What would be three tips you would give that person to encourage them in their sketchnoting or visual thinking, or just thinking, doing visual work experience?
Yeah. So the first tip, and I think this is a pretty important one. I've had a lot of people, when they find out I'm a designer, they say, "Oh, I'm not artistic." And to me, it's not about being artistic; it's about being creative.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to tell people, everyone's creative in their own way. How you express your creativity is going to be different than how I express my creativity. My creativity comes out in the form of sketch notes and these random headshots headshot illustrations that I do. Your creativity may be that you are a fantastic accountant and you can come up with really great ways to make things better and more efficient, right? Everybody, other people may just be fantastic cooks or bakers, right? Everybody expresses their creativity differently. And it's not about being artistic, it's about expressing yourself in the work that you do. And so, I think it's perfectly okay to admire somebody's work and say, "Oh, that's fantastic," and be a fan of it, but also not beat yourself up like, "Oh, I'm not that good at it because I can't draw like, my Frody and illustrate all
Mm-hmm.
these cool books, right?" Um, but I can draw my own thing and I can be happy with it. And so I think so my first one would be, everybody's creative in their own way, and that's
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
Do it, and so with that, it goes to the second, what I would say is my second tip is, enjoy what you do. That it's really hard, I think, especially today, for people to feel like I can enjoy this. I think you need to give yourself permission to enjoy those things that you find pleasing. Um, and because there's so many things out there today, it's easy to get overwhelmed with them. And I think it's okay to be nerdy and geeky, or really into sports, or you can like a range of different things. If my kids were to tell you what I like, they would say this. They'd rattle off a list of dozens of things. Because I don't think it's good to limit yourself to liking just one thing. You can like a range of different things, um, and that's okay. So that would be my second one. The third one is, there's this great quote from Ira Glass. You've probably heard this. Um, it's You can find a YouTube video on it somewhere, but he's talking about um, the work that you want to do. When everybody has a particular taste and style in their head that they imagine, but then when you try and do it, it doesn't meet those mental
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah.
Um, but you can get there by working at it. And I really think that um, you know everybody's capable of doing really great stuff, but you need to work to get to that point. And I think that's you know it's don't give up, but and that's the whole. And I think follow your passion is really bad advice, but I think do what you enjoy, um, because it may be that you may not enjoy your job, right? Which is providing for you and maybe your family. But if there's something outside of that that helps, that brings you joy, that you enjoy doing, do that in a way that helps you be happy.
Hmm.
And over time, your what you do with that will match what you see in your head. And there may be opportunities that come up from as a result of doing that. And because you never know,
Yeah.
that it's opportunity. I forget who said this quote, right? Opportunity is often masked as hard work, right?
Yeah.
If you're not doing the work to prepare for the thing that you want to do, when that opportunity comes, you're going to be ill prepared to do that thing that you want to do. And so it's important to do those things that you feel are important, that you love. And you will have an opportunity at some point, right? And the timing is really important. And then I'll do a fourth one, because this one I feel, and I've mentioned a little bit, you need to set boundaries on what you do. You need to be able to say, this is what's important to me, and these other things aren't so important. And so when it comes down to it, I won't be doing this, or this because it conflicts with my more important thing.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, my most important thing is my family, and everything that I do. I love design. I find it an extremely fulfilling, rewarding career. But it's a means to be able to provide for my family and make sure that they're taken care of. And I think that a lot of people are like, this is my hustle, this is my thing, right? And I think if you put so much of yourself into that you identify that with that, and if that thing goes away, where are you left?
Yeah.
And so what are those, set the boundaries for the things that are really important to you in your life that are not work related, because I can guarantee you everybody has something that's very important to them that is not work related. Set those boundaries, talk about those boundaries, and live your life in a way that reflects your priorities, because as you do that, people will see that, they will understand that, they'll respect that. And as you do those things and you express yourself through whatever creative means you have, you will gain those opportunities to be able to do those things and will lead a more fulfilling life, and that you're happy with. Right? You won't be living with regrets if you do those things.
I love the fourth tip. That's really great. Really encouraging.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for all those tips, and we appreciate your wisdom for all of us here. And it seems like just minutes, and suddenly we're near the end of the show. I'd love to hear where's the best place for people to find you, websites, social media, whatever you think would be the best place to start and connect.
You bet. So I do have a personal site, as we were talking about. It's at tiehatch.com. That's going to be where you can find me. I have links up to all my socials. I'm on Twitter for however long that's still up. I'm on Instagram. You can find me at both of those places. Most social media, you can find me at tiehatch. And so Instagram, Twitter, those have been my mainstays. I do have a profile on Mastodon as well. You can find me there at tiehatch at mastodon.online. And then also, most of my sketching archive at this point in time lives over on Pinterest. So if you go to pinterest.com/tiehatch/sketchnotes, I think I have a collection of about 300 different sketchnotes that I've done over the years. So you can find me there. I'm always happy to field any questions. If somebody, if you see something you like, send me a note. Say, hey Ty, I really like this sketch. Do you have it? And if it's something from Inktober, happy to do that. I did a thing years ago. Oh gosh, it's been almost 10 years. I did this. Scary, Mike. I'm getting old. I did this thing about 10 years ago called artist trading cards, or ATCs. And I think it might still be up. If you go to ATCs, sketchnote.tiehatch.com. Yeah. So I did a bunch of artist trading cards. It started off ostensibly as like, I'm going to do a little Christmas present for coworkers, and it turned into to a 4-month project that I had a daily post of some little sketch that I did. And so I'm happy to sell these or trade with you if you want to trade physical objects. There's a whole range of those out there as well. But yeah, so I just, it's fun. I enjoy doing random doodles, and I think at some point, there will be an opportunity for them, but until then, I get to enjoy them. Yeah.
Have fun with them the way they are, and maybe they'll turn into something else. Maybe not.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely get show notes put into the episode. So if you're anything in or any of these things pique your interest, you can go check it out. We'll have links to it. And thanks so much, Todd, for being on the show. I so appreciate the work you do and the representation you put into the world, and your leadership. Really need people like you doing that, and I'm so glad that you do it.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure. It's been fantastic talking with you today.
You too. Well, and for everyone listening, that'll wrap another episode of the Sketchnote Army Podcast. Till the next episode, this is Mike. Talk to you soon. The Sketchnote Army Podcast was created by me, Mike Rohde, and brought to you by Rohdesign Studios. It's produced and edited by Alec Polianis of AMP Creative Studios. The theme music was created by John Schiedermeyer. To support the creation of this show, I invite you to buy one of my books, the Sketchnote Handbook or the Sketchnote Workbook. You can find the books on Amazon, or go to peachpit.com and use the code ROHDE40 for 40% off. Please share this podcast with other visual thinking friends, and be sure to leave a nice rating on iTunes or your favorite podcast listening app so others can find the show.